Welcome to Weekly Ways to Better Days, the podcast, episode 38, Finding Purpose in Pain. Today we are with Amber, who shares her story about overcoming the loss of a child due to suicide and how she has found purpose in her pain to help educate others, to help children with their own mental wellness, as well as support parents in supporting their children. This episode was absolutely inspiring. She is an amazing woman who has truly overcome so much and has such a great mindset and shares the power of the word and, which I really love. And so I just am looking forward to y'all joining us on this episode and hearing her amazing journey that she has been through and her inspiring story. She is so strong, and it was such an honor to share time with her. So thank you for joining us, and I hope you enjoy the episode. Welcome, Amber. This is Amber, one of my dear friends from Coach Certification. She is someone that I truly admire, her strength, her willingness to change her mindset, her willingness to support herself and others continuously blows my mind. So I am so grateful for this opportunity to chat with you and for you to share your story. So Amber, why don't you go ahead and tell them a little bit about yourself?
Thanks, Katie. My name is Amber, and I am a wife and a mom. That's what I've known most of my life. I have 7 children, and I also have a new grandbaby, which is super fun and new-ish. I've spent most of my adult life as momming being my main focus and what I do full time. And then I was introduced to life coaching a few years. It's probably been about 3 years that I was introduced to life coaching, and I took an interest to it, and I was a student of it. And I really enjoyed it. And then in September of 2021, we lost our 18-year-old son Tegan to suicide. And in that journey, I knew from very soon after losing Tegan that I wanted to be a voice. I wanted to raise awareness. I wanted to do something. And this was very, very soon after I lost Tegan. And I had no idea how I could possibly ever do that again. I was so deep in grief and so deep in my just own trying to keep myself together, keep my family together, that I had no idea what that would look like or how I would ever do that. But I did eventually start some things early on. Even I just started by talking about it, raising awareness. I guess even from early on, even at his funeral, I talked about how he died, and a lot of people reached out to me even from that, and said thank you for not hiding it, not trying to cover it up, but we just talked about it. And I don't know, from the very beginning, that this is something that I wanted to do. So some things have come from that. We have created a local organization that does an annual event and some other things to help support suicide prevention and awareness. And then along this journey, I decided that I wanted to become a teacher of the things that I had partaken of as a student of life coaching, and I certified to become a life coach. And that has been something that has turned into something really awesome for me personally. And I've been able to really, one of my goals after Tegan died was to be able to find purpose in my pain. I hate the saying that everything happens for a reason, because that's really hard for me to swallow. But I do believe that no matter what situations we have in our life, we can find purpose through that pain if we so choose. And life coaching and the other things that I'm doing in prevention and awareness have really helped me fulfill that goal and continue to fulfill that goal. What I ended up doing with my life coaching certification is creating a program for teenagers. And my goal there is to help them build mental and emotional strength and resilience. I I'm hoping that I'm teaching them the things that they're not really being taught anywhere else. And that feels like the ultimate prevention to me.
Mhm.
So that has been very fulfilling. And I'm now recognizing the need for parents to join in. And so I've created a program for moms, because I feel like this is something that can be really beneficial to support us as we raise our kids. So very long story later. I am finding a lot of fulfillment in being a mom and having a career with purpose now at this stage of my life. Who knew that I would be 42 years old before I found a career and something that I loved to do, but that's how the story goes. And it's not been an easy transition. I won't say that. It's been a really great transition into finding some purpose for myself, and also, for my family and for others.
Amazing. I love it. So do you want to go ahead and go into like your story a little bit about not even overcoming, just surviving the loss of your son, and kind of what that looked like for you, and however you want to go about it.
Yeah. I mean, I think what I've learned about like grief and healing is that at least I'm almost 2 years into it. And at this point, it doesn't end, and I don't know that it ever will. I might be wrong about that. I don't know. You only know what you know, right? And this is how far into the journey I am. But grief changes. Your emotions change. But I don't see like an end point. I don't see like it being over ever. It's interesting as I think about it. Some of the things that I have really found purposeful and helpful for me is, number one, being really honest about the situation. And here's, I guess, before I start sharing my experience and my story, is I do believe that grief is so individual and so personal. And circumstances and situations can be different as well. I've lost people close to me. Losing a child, I mean, I've only done it once. Hopefully I never do it again, but it's terrible. It's awful. It's the worst thing that has ever happened to me in my life. Losing a child to suicide, like I said, I don't have experience losing a child any other way. So I'm assuming in this, but it's difficult. It's different, I would imagine, than losing a child in a different way. I swam in the what ifs and the could have, should have, would haves in the beginning. And I knew very quickly, I had a friend who lost a child, not to suicide. She lost a little boy to an accident. And she told me that her and her husband in the very beginning, they had said, we will never blame each other, and we will never put blame on ourselves. Are there things we could have done different? Absolutely. But we can't change it, and we can't bring him back at this point. And I took that advice. She gave me that within the first couple of weeks. And I took that advice to heart, because the amount of guilt, responsibility, coulda, shoulda, would haves that came with losing Tegan to suicide. Not even just in the moment, not even just in the actual night and the days leading up to his death, but I can go all the way back to from the time he was a tiny baby and tell you all the things that I wish I would have done different. And the honesty part of this comes in, is that I don't pretend that that's not there. I don't beat myself up for it, and I don't dwell in it, and I don't swim in that guilt, but I also don't pretend like it's not there, because if I pretended like it's not there, there would be no learning. There would be no lesson from that. And my youngest child in my home he just turned 6 years old. So I have a lot of parenting left to do. And there are things that I do now that are totally and completely different. And so the honesty in that is that just acknowledging without judgment that there are things that could have been handled, said, done, presented better, right? And I think too, as parents, that is a revolving door of opportunity and learning and growth if we allow it to be. some of us as parents get stuck in our ways and our methods, and we feel like that's the only way. And I've learned that that's not useful. I've learned that being open and willing to learn and explore new ideas is very useful and very helpful. It's very healing, and it's really great for the children that I'm still raising. I am grateful to give them a better opportunity than what, I was able or did give my older kids, Tegan and his siblings that are close to his age. So there's the honesty piece of that. There's I mentioned it before, there's the non-judgment, like being honest about where there is, not judging that, and it is so easy to swim in that sea of guilt and blame and responsibility. And is there some responsibility there? Absolutely. I'll never tell you that there's not responsibility there. There's also some responsibility of things that I did really, really well. And acknowledging that, if I'm going to acknowledge the bad and the mistakes, it's equally as important that I acknowledge the things that I did do well. One of the biggest gifts that Tegan ever gave me is, Tegan struggled with mental health for many years. And so the ironic part of him dying this way is that he was doing better. He had sought out therapy and counseling for himself for the first time. When I cleaned out his apartment, he had a list of goals above his bed. And he really was trying so hard. He really had goals and things that he wanted to do. And I think that's one of the hardest parts about my story, is that I really thought we were on the uphill. I really thought we were coming out of a hard thing. And so the timing of it, while him dying by suicide wasn't completely surprising, the timing of it kind of was, I guess. I felt like we were in a better place at that moment. But now I forgot what the point of this was. I lost my train of thought.
Well, you were talking about the things that you did right as well.
Oh, yes. And one of the gifts that he gave me is, a few months prior to his death, we had the conversation about, I was able to tell him, Tegan, I'm so sorry for all the mistakes that I've made. That conversation, I can remember where we were. I can remember like his tone. I can remember, it was a conversation that he was very open and receiving, and I was as well. And it was a very healing conversation for me. But, I was able to just apologize to him, like, hey, no, I've made a lot of mistakes. And I was able to explain to him that, as I'm growing and learning, it was always kind of our joke that he was my experiment. I always apologize for it, because I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. I've never parented a kid. He has one older sibling, but that sibling he was from my first relationship, and he lived a lot of his childhood with his dad. And so having that teenager in the house, being the primary parent for him, was something that, Tegan was my experiment, and he wasn't easy. And he knew that. He knew he wasn't an easy experiment. But in that conversation, he just really accepted my apologies. And he said, Mom, I don't want you to ever blame yourself for the choices that I'm making now. And he said, I understand that I am making choices. Tegan had some substance abuse issues. And he said, I know that I'm choosing these things, and that you taught me better, and that this isn't what you want for me. Like, we were really able to have that conversation. And I apologize for the things and I even pointed out some things, that I wish that I had done different with him. Tegan was always a very outgoing, I used to use the word stubborn. I try not to use that word anymore, but he was very independent. He was very determined. And if he wanted to do it, he would do it. And it didn't matter what anybody else thought. And, he was hard. He was hard to learn how to parent. I remember when he was like 3 and we took the training wheels off his bike, and we lived in this home, and it had a little bit of a slanted driveway, and it was all just gravel and dirt. And the kid would get on his bike, and he would ride it to the top and fall over and tip over. And then he'd take it to the top, and he'd try to go down, and we'd offer to help hold his seat or help walk along with him or whatever. And he would just scream, no, I'll do it myself. And I just remember his like sweaty little muddy face because he was sweating and he was so dirty, but he refused help. He absolutely refused help. And he did it in those, I don't even know how long it was, an hour. He taught himself to ride a bike with zero help, but he had so much frustration and, in it, but he refused help. But he was just that, he was just that type of kid. That's just how he was. It was hard to parent him, but I remember him telling me, you taught me how to work hard. I know that you love me no matter what. And don't think that what you've done is the reason why I'm choosing what I'm choosing. And sure, there were some things that we're products of our childhood, right? And so, and we all make our own decisions and we get to make our own choices, but I was grateful for that conversation because it was like an understanding between us. Like we both were able to admit our faults. We were both able to admit or like to talk about the things that we were grateful for that we'd done for each other, and I'm grateful that that conversation happened, and I'm grateful that it happened when it did. And it was somewhat fresh on my memory. When he died, after he died, some of the things that, really have helped me just continue on is, I guess number one is I have faith in a higher power. I have faith in God. And I do have a belief that I'll see him again somehow in some way. And I'm not sure what that would be like without that belief, because thinking of not having that feels pretty hopeless. Number one, that's what's pulled me through. And then obviously the day-to-day, keeping my pain clean, not adding additional suffering. Not that I do that perfectly every day. There's days that are there's some pretty painful extra suffering kind of days. But sorry. Knowing that, for months I didn't want to get out of bed, and I did so because I had other children. When I felt that transition of not just living for them, but wanting to live for myself, wanting to find hope in my future, that's when I knew that I was making some good progress and that I could do this. It's not an enjoyable experience. But as I think about loving this child who's no longer here and grieving this child who's no longer here, and who do I want to be for my kids that are here? What kind of mom do I want to be to these? And knowing that if I want to show up in the way I want to show up, then I have to do some work and I have to do some healing and I have to really get serious about this. I think there's this weird thing. I don't know. I would be interested to talk to other moms who had lost children this way, but I feel torn. I feel torn between heaven and honoring and loving and grieving this child and being in the present and loving and taking care of and providing memories and a future for my children who are still here. I think that that's an interesting place that I find myself in often. And it takes some conscious effort. I think that that is something that is important. It takes some really conscious effort to do both.
Yeah. I feel like you taught me this, the power of and, right? Like,
yes.
And I feel like that's so applicable in that moment. Like you giving Tegan energy and love and, while he's in heaven, and giving your children that are here the presence and the focus. And I could only imagine that's a juggle. It's like a big juggle of and.
It is a big juggle of and the power of and that is actually, it's funny that you brought that up. I haven't thought about that. It's just kind of part of what I do now. And I haven't thought about that, but I remember when I first was able to apply the power of and to my life, it was like so freeing because it helped me understand, like, I can do both. I can love and honor Tegan and I can grieve him and still feel what I need to feel over here. And I can still be present. And I think so much like, I give myself more permission to just be me and feel what I need to feel nowadays than I ever knew how to do before, and some days you do just have to power through and make it happen. But I think one of the things that has helped me heal the most is I've allowed myself to feel. I have allowed myself that grief, and I do things for myself that help me in that. One of the things that I love to do is I love to go to the cemetery. And I've had people tell me, like, I don't understand why you like to do that. I don't find peace there, but I do. I find so much peace to be able to just go sit at his headstone in the quiet. Our cemetery is off the road a ways, so usually I'm alone. I'm not seen. It's out of sight from the main road, and occasionally there's other people there, but I find a lot of peace in just sitting there in the quiet and, talk to myself, talk to Tegan, talk to God. I probably look like a crazy person up there all by myself, but I find a lot of peace there, and not everybody does. And I think that's important. You have to find what works for you personally. Healing is not linear. Healing is not a one size fits all. Healing is not, what works for me might not work for someone else. But the important part of it is that we find what does work for us, and we create that, and we do that, and we pursue that, so that then we can, continue on.
Definitely. I want to touch on really quick about how you said, like, once you found the like ability to want to like live your life for you as well, not just your kids, what was that moment? Like, what was that? When did you find that? What made you come to that realization?
Let me, I can't remember like one distinct moment. I do remember being in bed. The kids were in school, and my little guy was still in preschool, so he only had school twice a week, but I would put them on the bus and I would go back to bed, and I would just lay in my bed. And I remember one day my husband saying to me, I was totally offended, and I'm sure he meant it out of the kindness of his heart, but he said to me, he said, you have to figure this out. Like, you have to get out of bed. And I was like, I don't care. I don't want to get out of bed. There's nothing like, why, what is the purpose? And I think it was about that time that I started asking myself, like, why, what is the purpose? Like, what am I going to do forever? And the grief world, like where I was reaching out to look for support, I don't know if it was just where I was looking, or if, I don't know, but I felt like I was either being met with, everything you're feeling is okay. Feel it as long as you need to. You don't have to do anything. So it was very validating, and that is useful, right? It was very validating, but it kind of just left me stuck there. And then there was this other world of just put on your big girl britches and get on with your life. Like, you've had long enough, get over it, go on. And that didn't sit well with me at all. I literally felt like I was dying. And so I was met, I just felt like it was like one extreme or the other. And then I remember starting to ask myself these questions, like, I am still here. I am breathing, and I am living, and I am on this earth. And outside of taking that away from myself, this is where I am. And so what do I want that to look like? And at first it still was based around my kids. Like, it was very much about what kind of mom do I want to be for them. But then there was that transition in, what do I want for me? Like, what do I want the rest of my future to look like? The other thing that kind of opens your eyes is when you lose a child, like, it made me realize that I am just me. Does that make sense? I was so wrapped up in being a mom that was what that is what defined me. But it like made me realize, like, I'm still his mom, but he's not here anymore. Like, there is a piece of me. I am just me. So what do I want for just me? So I think it was just slowly a process that I went through, and I just kept asking myself, what do I want for myself? And actually it's been a very empowering transition to create something in my life. Okay, I don't want to sound that is outside of my kids. I love my kids. It doesn't take anything away from that, but creating this helps me. It helped me heal. It helped me realize my abilities, my strengths, what I could do. And then also it opened up this world about there's not just this little family that I can affect and that I can take care of. There's this world of people who also need love and support in a way that I'm able to offer now. That's very fulfilling work, whether it's on the coaching end of it or whether it's just strictly on the suicide prevention and awareness part of it, mental health awareness. I've been able to touch a lot of people and I've been able to have a lot of conversations about this because I've been vulnerable and open. That is part of who I am outside of being a mom and what I can do outside of being a mom. And that for me, that's that transition of what I want for me as an individual versus, a mom and my family. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's powerful for even parents that haven't lost their children, right? Because so many parents lose themselves in parenting. And I mean, I admire and I honor the fact that it's like you put your children first, but I'm also of this belief like you have to put yourself first so that you can be the best version of yourself for your children. And I mean, it's fascinating that it like obviously took such an extreme thing, but like the beauty that you have found in finding what you want and finding purpose in your life outside of your children, I'm sure has made you just an even better mom, right? Like you're showing up for your kids more, but I think it's like such a valuable thing that you gave yourself permission, especially after losing a kiddo, to then find who you are, because it's like that. I would say, I mean, I worked with kids. I have my bachelor's degree in child and adolescent development. I spent a lot of time around children. I am not a mom myself yet, which I think I'm so grateful that I've learned so much about it so that like I can apply things like this in my own life when I do hopefully have children. But it's like this idea that you don't have to give up all that you are for your children. And in fact, that actually is not the best thing for yourself or your children. It's when you find purpose and this idea of, I also want to kind of circle back on like this whole concept of like everything happens for a reason. Like that is a really tough thing to think about, especially when you're going through anything like that. That is I would say is never a helpful thing to even think about when you're in the midst of anything. Like I love the idea of finding purpose behind pain. That's something that, I have spent a very long time doing. And I think when you find purpose behind pain, that is a much easier thing to kind of even digest and even work towards when you are in pain. Is like, how can I find purpose within this pain versus like, yeah, everything happens for a reason, because there's a lot of shitty things that happen in the world. And to just be like, everything happens for a reason, even if in hindsight, you can then go back and be like, wow, I've learned all of these wonderful things since this happened. But like, yeah, I probably would have loved to learn all these wonderful things without that thing happening. Like, and I probably could have, right? So like to say that everything happens for a reason, I think if you can utilize it in a sense in hindsight and it works for you, great. But I really don't think it's useful to tell people that. Like, like I don't think so. So I love that, like, the purpose and the pain, because I think that is the common theme that I've seen really anyone who has experienced any sort of trauma that has really come out of it and utilized it to help themselves and help others is that theme of like, yeah, there's purpose in this pain. Like I want to help others through this. I want to be a voice for, other people, create awareness. And like, yeah, I find that so powerful. And I'm so glad that you brought that up, because I do think like, yeah, everything happens for a reason. You're like, shut up.
Well, I think it's so true. And, the reality is bad things are going to happen. Hard things are going to happen. We are going to have traumas. We are going to have trials. Like there's no escaping that in this life. I mean, I'm starting to think that, some people get like the lower end of that spectrum and some people get the higher end of that spectrum. But the last 5 years have been really difficult in particular for me. There were just a really lot of things that happened. There was some things that happened within our family that were very traumatic for each of my family members individually, and then us as a family. And I'm not really at liberty to say what that is, that I want to protect some other people's privacy there, but I lost a lot of relationships that were really important to me. And that created it was a traumatic time in my life. And then he was 13 at the time, was in a propane explosion, and burnt. I don't remember the percentage. It was mostly his legs, his one arm, and his face. But for an hour, I really didn't know if he was dead or alive. And it was such a traumatic event. And then we lost one of my very good friends and my sister-in-law to cancer. And then we lost Tegan 6 months after she died. And then we lost my nephew 6 weeks after that. And I lost a baby in a pregnancy during that time. And it was just, my therapist said to me one day, he said, I have worked with people who've experienced this amount of trauma and difficulties over a lifetime. I've never worked with anybody who's experienced it in this amount of time. And that's kind of when I started thinking about this, because I'd always believed everything happens for a reason. Well, that was becoming very difficult to understand. It made me feel like, what am I doing wrong? Like, if this is all happening for a reason, what's going on? Why is this all happening to us so fast? And I decided, when I started losing people, what do I want to learn from them? What do I want to take from their lives and from what I loved about them? And what do I want to apply in my life? And that was kind of the beginning of like the purpose and the pain thing. My sister-in-law was like this amazing party planner, and I always gave her a hard time because my kids get a chocolate covered cake with, it's ugly, and happy birthday, here's your candles. And she throws these elaborate parties. And, so it was always kind of this joke behind us, but she was always the one to say, let's go on vacation, let's make memories. And I took that from her. Like, every day is a beautiful thing to celebrate. So let's celebrate it, and let's celebrate it big. It doesn't have to be in that way, but let's make sure we are celebrated. Let's make the memories versus not, versus not. And so those are some things that I wanted to take from her and apply in my own life. And I think that I've been able to do that from everything. Like, what is the purpose that I can find in this particular pain right now? To me, it feels much better than everything happens for a reason. I don't know why things happen, and I'm sure there are reasons behind them. Everybody has their choices, and people are able to decide for themselves, and that creates some pain for for others. But I honestly believe that if you so choose, you can find purpose in pretty much every pain. I really believe you can, whether that's personal growth or an outreach of what you do outside of that, or whatever that is. I do think there is some purpose in each thing if you look.
I agree. And I mean, from someone like, I experienced a lot in a kind of back to back, in like, it was like 4 years. And you're just like, you're kind of like, holy shit, like what, like that. So that sentiment. So I feel like, I mean, I'm not telling anyone to like ditch it if it works for them, but I'm just saying, like, don't utilize things like that and use them against yourself, right? Because like, that's where it's like, we take a sentiment that's supposed to help us, supposed to like make us feel better and like give us relief. And if it's not making you feel better or giving you relief, like, ditch it. Like, don't use it, because if it's making you try and weed through, what am I doing wrong? Why is all this happening? Like, that is not useful, especially when you're in the midst of like going through a bunch of stuff. Like, it's just not. And so I'm a firm believer that you can find purpose in any bit of pain that you experience. And I do find the strongest, the most successful. And when I say successful, I don't mean like financially successful. I mean like as humans, like the most successful humans, like walking around this earth, being kind, being loving, having purpose. They are people that have experienced pain and have taken that pain and created purpose around it. And I think that that is really, I mean, especially when if it's a loss, like we're grieving the loss of someone or something like that, I feel like what an honor it is in like for them and who they were for us to create something good from the pain that we felt like. And I truly believe like they would want us to. They would want like, like they're looking down on us like this is amazing. Like thank you for doing this. And that they even find purpose. Like I mean, I'm spiritual, so I feel like I feel like they're with us. I'm very much so in that capacity. I feel like for the people that I've lost are almost more with me now that they're gone than they were here on earth, especially given certain circumstances with certain people. And so like just knowing like, oh, they're proud of this. Like I believe, Tegan's like so proud of you, like to like for you to take what you have experienced and be able to not only just like help create awareness, but to seriously help impact the mental health of other kiddos. And oh my goodness, to help parents, like what a gift to help parents navigate their, them raising children because it's hard. I mean, like you're saying like Tegan was an experiment, but I feel like every kid is an experiment, right? Like it's not just Tegan. Like it's so funny because I feel like that's life. Life is an experiment. Like we never know what's going to happen. And if someone tells you that they have it figured out, run like hard and fast because no one has it figured out, right? We're just all like walking around, like trying to keep our heads up, trying to like figure out what we're going to do in the next moment when something presents itself. And so I think that life is an experiment. And I think, of course, you can, I also kind of want to circle back to this like place of like taking responsibility and how powerful that was for your friend to tell you to not blame yourself and not blame your husband, because what I think is a very common thing is when, especially when you experience tragedy within your family, a lot of the time it, separates spouses because there's like some sort of resentment, whether it's towards themselves and then they internalize it and they take it out or whatever. But it's like that really doesn't do anything for anyone, is to place blame or and I think there's a difference. I really do believe there is a difference in taking ownership of how you showed up and deciding that you're going to show up differently in the future versus blaming yourself. Because blame just, I mean, we know through coaching and all of that, when you start blaming yourself, you're just in this shame cycle. And when you're in a shame cycle, you show up in ways that you don't want to. You start perpetuating the things that you are blaming yourself for. So you start doing more of it. And even though it feels like you're trying to counteract it by being like, this is what I shouldn't have done. Well, it really doesn't do that. It just amplifies it and makes us do it even more, And so I think that is like, it's like granting yourself permission to not blame yourself or anyone else. Mm-hmm. That's so powerful.
Mm-hmm. It is one of the things that I have learned about my own parenting. And then as I look at the world of parents, right? I was that mom when Tegan was a baby. Well, I guess right before I had Tegan, I had my oldest was like this angel baby, right? He was so great. It was this beautiful little toddler who was obedient. The second you said a word, you didn't like, he was just this dream kid. And I remember I was that mom in the grocery store, like, oh, my kid will never act like that. No way will my kid ever act like that. And then I had Tegan and I was the mom leaving the full cart of groceries, carrying my screaming toddler, like absolutely throwing a fit out of the grocery store. That was my experience with him. But I'm grateful that I had that experience because I was judgmental. I wasn't nice. I was like, what is wrong with you parents? What is wrong with your kids? Like, get it together. And I truly strongly believe that almost every parent in the whole world, obviously we can't group them all into one because there are parents that don't, but for the most part, we all are doing the very best that we can. And that is, I remember during that conversation with Tegan, I just said, I did the very best then that I knew how to do. And now I know different. And so I will try to do different. And I continue to learn. And so I can do and be better. Right. And one of the things I said after Tegan died is we can't do better if we don't know better. And that's one of my purposes. It's like, if we're going to do better, then we have to know better. So this is what we can do to know better from whatever it is that I can offer. Right. But really looking back at myself as a mom to that young mom to those kids, I truly was doing the best I could with the tools, knowledge, and information that I had. And there's no part of me that doubts that. Could I have done better? Absolutely. But with the information and the tools that I had then, I was doing the very best that I can. And what that is life. That is what we do. We can't do better until we know better. So there's some grace in that, and it allows you to just do these things with non-judgment, and the blame thing comes into that. My husband and I, we've had many conversations about what we could have, should have, would have done, and the things that we're grateful that we did, and the things that we regret, and the things that we wished would have been different. But ultimately we always did the best that we could.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's powerful, and I think it's different to have a conversation in the like mindset of like, yes, this could have been done differently. Yes, we could have done better. So let's do better. Let's learn from it, and let's take this experience and grow, because we have, other kiddos that we're raising, and we want to be better parents, versus like, we should have done this, we should have done that, we didn't do this, we didn't do that, and blaming, and then taking accountability for someone else's actions, right? Because at that point your son is an adult. And like, I love that you kind of put that in perspective as well, because yes, we do have impacts on other people, and especially when you're parents, you totally have an impact on raising your children and how they, turn out. But like, there comes a point where we are our own people, and we are like responsible for what we do. And I mean, it sounds like Tegan took ownership for his life at a very young age, right? Like, he was going to do what he was going to do, which is so fascinating, because you're like, what do you mean you're 3 years old and like you're going to keep trying to like go down and teach yourself how to ride a bike? And most parents would probably not allow their kids to do that, right? Like, they wouldn't like allow their kids that space. But it's like, to me, that story is like so cool, because it's like, oh my gosh, like, that's what he wanted to do, and he was going to find a way to do it no matter what. So like, to support him and just like, okay, like, like, keep going. And that shows what kind of person he was, and what kind of parent you were too. Like, what a beautiful thing. I think it's so powerful to let your kiddos be who they are, especially when they're showing you that at such a young age. I mean, that's incredible. So, I mean, that's a lot that you've balanced really well, like these opposite feelings and these things. Like, you're like, okay, yes, I could have done better, but yes, this is the situation at hand, and he was responsible for his decisions. Yes, I'm going to do better, but no, I'm not going to blame myself. Like, that, I think, is like, I mean, that's like striking gold, because most people don't find that ability.
Right. And that takes work. That takes consistent effort and work. That doesn't just happen. And I think that was part of, you had asked me earlier when I really wanted to do it for myself, that was the work. We can do what we want with trauma and hard experiences. And I knew that, I have a past history many, 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 many years ago of drug and alcohol abuse, but I knew that now, if I didn't choose carefully what I was going to do with this, I could either create goodness and just survival out of it, or I could make it worse. Right. And it takes work. It takes conscious effort. We have to decide what we want, and we have to choose what direction we're going to go. And I think that that's important to realize, is it's just a series of decisions. Honestly, it's a series of decisions,
Yeah. And I think
direction.
like, yeah, no. And I think that that's super important to talk about, is like, we have to make the choice to choose which direction we're going to go. And what I also think about is like, what I've noticed in my own life and in other people's lives, like, you can make a decision and make a lot of change in a very quick period of time. Like all of a sudden you can just like shift something, your way of thinking, and like make a decision, and you can just start acting in that, like in alignment with that decision. And I think when we experience trauma, a lot of the time we don't understand it and we don't think it should happen. And it kind of puts us in a victim mentality. And I think that what I've noticed is the people that don't sit in that victim mentality are the people that really heal, because it's like when we sit there and think about why did this happen, or how could this happen to me, or all of these things, it's like, yes, they're valid, like 100%, like that's a valid thought to have, but is it useful?
Yes.
And that's like where I've found in my own experiences and, helping others heal is like, is that useful for you? Because how does that make you feel? Like, so questioning why it happened, why, like you may never understand why. And being okay with that, with the not understanding why, and then giving yourself the grace to like decide how you want to move forward. And I think that's kind of one of these things that, like, especially I would say would seem to be hard with like losing a child. I don't know, but like giving yourself permission to move forward and still create a life for yourself and your other children. Like, I could see how that would be almost like a tug of war. Like you want to like, it's like you just want to make it about like you want to honor this child that you've lost. You want to like really like sit in that, but like there's so much more living to do, right? And like giving yourself permission to do that. I mean, I feel like that had to have been like a whole process.
It was a whole process. And it's interesting, you talking about that just made me remember something. Is I connected with a lot of moms online early on who had also lost children to suicide. And I remember like the connecting part of that, to connect to somebody who really understands what you're going through, is very powerful, right? And then there was also part of that where there were so many moms who were 5, 6, 7 more or more. They were years and years and years out from losing that child, and they were still stuck very much in what I was experiencing in those first 6 months, that type of grief, because it does evolve and the feelings do, you don't get over it, but it changes, right? And those first few months were debilitating, honestly. Like it was a struggle to get out of bed, but there were some of these moms that were still there. And I knew very quickly, I don't want to do that. I want to figure out how to heal in a way to where I can see a future and I can see hope again. I remember I explained it for so long as like, I'm just seeing in black and white right now. And I remember the day driving to one of my kids' activities and the hillside, I was like, it's green. The trees are green. I'm seeing my life in color again. And that's kind of when I started to come out of that. I don't know if it even has a name. I just called it that deep grief, like that in the very beginning where I could barely function. And I remember like seeing life in color again. And I was like, okay, I might be able to, create a life. I might really be able to do this again. And so it's interesting because, like I said, it is a journey. It is different for everybody. I think asking yourself the question of, like, what do I want from this? We have no control, obviously, over the situation. We can't change it, but what do I want moving forward? What do I see for myself and my family moving forward? It's those useful questions, I could have stayed stuck in that early grief, and I can see how it has happened. And I've watched other moms do it, and I can totally understand how that can happen. And I think that it is, like we talked about before, it's just conscious decisions of what you want and then moving toward that goal to make that happen.
Yeah, I mean, that's so powerful because it's like you see people in grief, and I find it fascinating because I have had my own share of grief, not obviously losing a child, but losing parents and like at a young age, all these things. And I really do believe grief evolves if you allow it, right? Like and I say if you allow it because I think you have to give yourself permission. You have to consciously try and like change your relationship with grief. And it's almost like I was doing a podcast earlier about, someone who had cancer, and it was like, not allow, like, I think a lot of people make these things their identity. And I think that this is also the power in talking about not having your children just be your identity, right? Because eventually your children are going to leave. So like hopefully you're not going to like lose a child, but eventually your children are going to leave and have their own lives. And so you see this with parents that are just parents and they don't have an identity outside of being a parent, that when their children leave, they don't know what to do with themselves. And so I feel like, I don't know, a message that we could probably like shout out the rooftops to parents is like, you need to have your own identity. And also in any sort of trauma or any sort of experience, like if you make that experience your identity, I think you're making it very difficult to ever heal or fully grieve the process of anything. And it's hard because it feels like you should make it your identity because it's such a big part of you, like, and such a big experience. And I think you want to probably like, you don't want the person to be forgotten. You don't want there's so much to it, but it's like, that can't be your identity. Because if you allow it to be your identity, then like, especially in the case of like you losing a son, well, at that point, you're pretty much dead too.
Mm-hmm.
The reality of it is if you make that your identity and you lay in bed forever and you don't show up for life, and like then you might as well be gone too at that point, because you essentially halfway are.
Yeah. It's so true. I remember probably for the first, I don't know, 9 months to a year, my kids are involved in things. And so I would go to activities, I would go to community events, things that they were involved in. And I hated it. And I hated being in public. And I hated it so much. I would wear my sunglasses. I would wear a hoodie, whatever I could. I didn't want to talk to people. I didn't want to talk about it in person. Number one, I would cry all the time. But I remember telling, it was my husband or my daughter, I said, I feel like I walk in a room or in front of a crowd or at the bottom of the bleachers and everybody's like, oh, look, it's the girl who lost her kid to suicide. Like that is literally what I thought everybody was thinking about me. I have no idea what they were thinking about me. Maybe they were, but I was thinking that I had created that identity for myself, and it made me feel uncomfortable, not because just because that was what I felt like everybody looked at me as, and then of course, you think whatever you think about that. But the reality of it is that was my own. I placed the identity on myself. I have no idea what other people thought. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. I have no idea. But living in that identity, it kept me stuck in that identity, and even as I began my coaching work, I really had to do a lot of work of like, I had this thought process of, well, who am I to help anybody because I lost my son this way? I did a lot of work there to know that because of my experiences, this is why I can do the work versus I'm not qualified to do the work because does that make sense on how it was just my own self-limiting beliefs, but it is a transition. And I don't know, I think as we're having this conversation, I had a friend say to me, like, some people who experience trauma, like you were saying, they just stay stuck in that trauma, but the work is available to do. It's a choice that we have to make. And it's our responsibility to ourselves, to our families, to the world, to do that work so that we can then show up in the world as a helpful person to be able to, our stories are powerful. Stories are very powerful.
100%. I mean, that's why I'm here, right? Like, this is why we're doing this podcast, is because, I started this podcast where I ended up, it was just me and I shared my story. And I remember sharing parts of my story that like, it was something that I was holding on to for so long, and like a trauma that I identified so deeply with. And it's like, wait, this isn't my identity. And you build like all these walls and you build this like whole life around these traumas. And it's like, we don't have to do that. Like, we really don't. And like this idea of who am I to help someone, like, to me, I'm like, I've worked through this process. So I'm like, of course I'm here to help people. Like I've been through this, and this. This is why I'm valuable. But it's also like when you feel kind of like, I would say broken, or you feel like you're unhealed, which I think, you know, healing is kind of like an ongoing process, but I do think that there is a point where you reach like I would have just kind of come to this realization that I think I'm I've reached the healing of my past that I've been trying to do for so long. And I'm like I'm in this like kind of like this space of like, holy shit, I'm here. This is what I've been working so hard to do. And knowing that there's going to be more healing in my future because life is going to happen, but it's not like focused on the past and what I've been trying to heal, like all these things from the past. And it's like, so when you realize that like, okay, like there is an endpoint, I think, to some capacity of healing of certain things. Like you can fully heal from certain things, but then just knowing that like, okay, I'm going to still have to heal as things come, you know, my way. And so like, I mean, I have an interesting relationship with grief because I'm at a point where like, you know, I have lost quite a few people that I love, and also that caused a lot of trauma in my life. Like it was like a messy pile of grief. So I had all the messy, like, you know what I mean? It was like there's shit everywhere. Like, and so I feel like, you know, it's funny because we talk about grief. It's about to be my mom's 9 years here on July 14th. And there's part of me that like I'm at peace with it all. You know, have forgiven her for the things that I need to forgive her for. I love her for trying and being the best version that she could be. But there's still this aspect of like, holy shit, 9 years. Like I started realizing like this is almost a third of my life. Like I'm 33. So like at the 10-year, 11-year mark, like that's almost like a third of my life that my mom has been gone. And so I think that even like things like that, like those are always going to come up. And I think it's always evolving, but like, again, if you allow it. So I see so many people stuck in this idea that something shouldn't have happened.
Yes.
And I think that that really holds us back from healing and grieving and like moving forward. And while we have so much evidence to justify why this shouldn't have happened, like, you know, I'm not saying that it's not valid, but that is one of those things that aren't useful. Like, it's like when you resist reality, you lose 100% of the time, right? So like, it's like this idea of how do I accept something that I really fucking dislike. Like I dislike that this happened, but how do I accept it so that I can move forward and it's not killing me? Because eventually that's what it does, is it kills you slowly. And I believe that. I've watched it happen to people, and that's what drove me to want to heal so deeply. And so it's like it's so powerful to talk to someone that has experienced what you have experienced, because you have chosen not to make it your identity, but you have also chosen to allow it to change who you are and become a better person. And so while it is still a part of you, it's not your whole identity. While it's still one of probably the most impactful things you've ever been through and shaped who you are as this person that you are now and will continue to shape who you are in the future, it's like you have chosen not to take it on as your identity. And I just like, that's so inspirational. I mean, it really is.
Thank you. I think it's that balance between the accepting what is that we can't change, you know, and then allowing ourselves to validate those emotions that we have there, like allowing those emotions and feeling that, and then choosing what that purpose is from that pain that we want to take. And that comes on its own timeline for each person. But like you said, it's a choice. We stay in it, and it is who we are, or we choose to use it in different ways. And it just comes down to choices and decisions that we get to make for ourselves and what we want. So
yeah, I think that that's something that like is really hard to hear when you're in the thick of it, like it's a
Yes.
choice.
Mhm.
But that is probably one of the most powerful things when you realize it's a choice and an empowering things. And it's hard because it's not what you want to hear because it doesn't feel like a choice when
Right.
you're in it. It doesn't
No.
feel like you have a choice. And I think that that's where kind of a little bit of faith comes in. Like
Yeah.
you're like, oh shit, like whatever the faith is, but like faith that you have a choice and that you can kind of get out on the other side and know that you're going to have days that are just
Mhm.
still awful. Like I think that that's understandable and like to recognize that. But I think more than anything, the power of this episode is like, whoa, you do have a choice. You have a choice to choose life. You have a choice to choose yourself. You have a choice to still choose happiness. You have a choice to honor the ands, the hard parts, the good parts. You have a choice to allow yourself to process grief and not stay stuck in it and to move through it and allow it to evolve. And I think that that's like, if I could like get anyone to take anything from this episode, it would be like, look at like you truly do have the power of choice. I
Mhm.
mean, like you are a pure example of that. And even when you didn't feel like you had a choice, you you chose. You
Mhm.
did. You chose to get up. And even if it was for your kids at, one
Mhm.
point, and then you just that evolves too. Like it evolves into like this beautiful thing. And I just I admire that in you that you chose to keep living life and you chose to keep moving forward. And I think that is the true inspiration. And I mean, I've told you I think many times that you inspire me and you're such an amazing human being. And that's why I wanted to have you on this podcast, is because I think that is so inspiring to others. And I love that you were able to share your story in a way that you really shared a lot of empowering information, and you shared it in such a way that was, I feel like, so beneficial. Like we were not here to trauma bond. We're not here to like, to sit in it and feel bad. And I think that you did a really beautiful way, like you had a really beautiful way of sharing the difficult parts, but also honoring yourself and what you wanted to share and what is yours to not share, and all of that. But more importantly, giving inspiration to others to really like find hope that you can choose
Right.
to have a different path. And it's still painful sometimes.
Yeah. Yep. It is. I'll never not miss Tegan. I'll never not, wish things were different. I'll never not, miss him. I'll always love him. I'll always, you know, want his story to have ended differently. And I will continue to live and find hope and hopefully, you know, fulfill that goal of breathing hope and light and those feelings of wanting and um wanting to go on into my family and into other people, so finding purpose in the pain, to find purpose in the pain.
Yeah, and you are breathing light and love into other people, and it is amazing to be on the receiving end of that, even though I'm not in the community that you're working with, but I get to share space with you often. So I get to be on the other end of that. And so I know other people are receiving that. So, I mean, that's amazing. And the way that I normally end this is to discuss what you think would be a good title for the episode.
Wow.
So if you have any ideas.
Hmm. Um, I don't know. The two things that I feel pretty strongly about are finding purpose in pain and, the power of and. You can do both. You can grieve deeply and love someone and miss someone, and you can create beautiful things in life. And you can apply that in any area of life, not just grief.
Yeah. That's what I would lean into. Which one are we gonna do?
I get to name my own episode.
Yes.
Purpose in pain, finding purpose in pain.
I love it. I love it. And I just want to say thank you, thank you, thank you so much for being willing to come on here to share space, to share your story, to be a light in this world because we need more of them, and to find purpose in your pain and allow yourself to become this version of yourself so that you can help others and inspire others and do what you are here to do, which is not just be a mom, but also to be Amber and find, your true purpose and light, which I know part of that is being a mom, but sharing what you have learned. And I do want to say thank you for doing the work. Thank you for doing the work, because not only are you an example of what is possible, but because you have done the work, you are impacting the world on such a great level. And when I say the world, I mean everyone that you come in contact with, right? Because you're a totally different version of yourself than you would have been if you didn't do the work. And so I am honored to know you. I'm honored to love you. And I'm just so grateful that you took the time to be on my podcast with me.
No, thank you so much, Katie. And same to you. I love the saying, we always hear that hurt people and healed people heal people. And I really believe that. And so I love this work that we're both doing. And I love this sphere that we're able to work in. So thanks for having me, and thanks for what you're doing.
Yes, absolutely. And then go ahead and just let people know where they can find you, if they would like to connect.
Awesome. So I am on Facebook and Instagram as Honestly Amber. Is that right? Yeah. Honestly Amber Coaching on Facebook and Honestly Amber on Instagram. And then you can just go to honestlyamber.com as well.
Yay. Well, thank you so much. And I appreciate you. And I know this is going to be so helpful for so many people.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yes.